that happened a month after the controversial September attack. What lawmakers are now saying about the contrasting operations.
Plus, Trump mocked the affordability crisis, but aides are now pushing him to campaign on that very thing during his upcoming trip to Pennsylvania.
And we're going to speak with the former mayor of New Orleans about ICE raids in his city and why American citizens aren't exempt.
Also tonight, with Texas's congressional map now set, Indiana Republicans are facing pressure from Trump to pass their own new map.
Good evening. Welcome to the Weekend Primetime. Marjorie Taylor Greene is unleashed, and she's not holding back. In a new interview, she shares what her Republican colleagues have been saying behind Trump's back. Take a listen.
I'm going to ask you about this almost solid support he has among Republicans in Congress. Is there in that support fear? Does the support come about because they're afraid that they'll get death threats?
I think they're terrified to step out of line and get a nasty Truth Social post on them. Yes.
And they're watching what happened to you?
Yes.
Behind the scenes, do they talk differently?
Yes.
How?
Oh, it would shock people.
Well, let's shock people.
Okay. I watched many of my colleagues go from making fun of him, making fun of how he talks, making fun of me constantly for supporting him, to when he won the primary in 2024, they all started, excuse my language, Leslie, kissing his ass and decided to put on a MAGA hat for the first time.
Well, Trump is not going to like this interview, and I'm here for it, frankly, because it's highly entertaining. And I think that this moment, what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing, is such a moment of political realignment within the MAGA movement. You know, you've got, she wants to preserve her outsider credentials while Trump has become an elite. So who is going to stick with Trump as MAGA elite as he's, you know, transitioning into this new phase versus who's going to go in the direction of MTG, who is still pursuing policies that are what the MAGA faithful want?
I got to say, this doesn't surprise me in the sense that I think all of us instinctively knew, and I think a lot of us questioned whether, like, Republicans really believed in Donald Trump, or whether they just kind of fell in line because of the fact that, as she said, they didn't want a Truth Social post, they didn't want to be attacked, they didn't want to get into open warfare with Donald Trump. And I think a lot of us, you know, we speak to a lot of politicians, and I think a lot of them probably say the same thing, that, like, they have to go along with it just because they don't want to be in the crosshairs. And the reality is, he was the political kingmaker of the Republican Party for the better part of the last 10 years. Now that he is kind of beginning to go into, you know, the last couple of years of his term, he may not have the same kind of political power. It'll be interesting to see whether they still are as afraid of him as they are or as they were of him just a couple of years ago.
But as you said, we kind of intrinsically knew this.
Yes.
But also through the reporting, we knew this. We knew that people were behaving in a certain way because they were afraid of death threats. And then we can also watch certain people's political evolutions. I mean,
Lindsey Graham,
Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio,
Ted Cruz.
Or his own vice president, who once compared him to Hitler.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you see that, I mean, you can come to your own conclusion about what has led someone to make those kinds of transformations, but those are very big turns to make. To use that kind of terminology about somebody and then be willing to work alongside them, you know, I think those questions about the Republican coalition have been there for a really long time. So I think a lot of people are going to enjoy pulling out the popcorn and watching Marjorie Taylor Greene spill certain people's secrets. But are they going to be shocked by the contents of those secrets?
I feel like I have been asking for 10 years now, when will the fever break? When are they finally going to distance themselves, they being the Republican Party, who clearly have disdain for this president behind closed doors? When are they finally going to break with the president? And I was naive and thought it was going to happen a long time ago, like in the first term after they got tax cuts through. I was like,
January 6th, maybe?
It almost happened. People were kind of feeling things out after January 6th to see if they could.
But then Kevin McCarthy went down and rehabilitated his career.
Yeah, exactly.
And also the Trump trials in New York. I mean, that's what gave him a turbo shot at the White House again. But it
just seems like as long as he has a following among the people and among the right-wing media who are sort of doing his bidding and circling the wagons whenever he needs them to, the rest of the party is not going to break with him. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, in some ways, is a cautionary tale, but there have been many other cautionary tales for Republicans who might think about speaking out. I think it's really going to take his if he finally leaves office, someday, he's not going to live forever. Someday he will pass away. We don't know who's going to fill his shoes. I think that's really the only moment where you're going to see a true realignment of the Republican Party.
I am more interested still in what Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to do now going forward with a lot of this kind of new political capital that she has kind of built for herself, this ability to break with Trump, and the speculation as to whether or not she is going to mount some kind of political run for Senate, even though the president doesn't want her to, or potentially something else on the national stage in the years ahead. But certainly she has some
She's
moment.
not going away.
She's not going quietly, and she's positioning herself as a truth teller, which there's always a public appetite.
Let's just say a Trump truth teller. I don't want to just say she's a truth teller across the board, because
she's taking that mantle, so to speak, and that's why we're watching, and that's why we're hanging on what she's saying. Because is she going to tell us what others are too scared to say?
And never underestimate how short people's memories can be. And there are already Democrats signaling that they're willing to work with her, or if she could be part of a big tent, because a big tent, and I'm not condoning that in any way. I'm just saying that those sentiments are already out there. And there's a lot of time before we get to the midterms. It's going to happen very quickly, but there's also still a lot of time.
Indeed. We're going to have a lot more on Marjorie Taylor Greene and that interview later on in the show. But let's turn now to the big story this week, Pete Hegseth, and the most pressing crisis haunting his 10-month tenure as the defense secretary, the ongoing military strikes on boats off of Venezuela's coast. Tonight, new questions are emerging about another boat strike that was announced a month after the controversial September attack. That would be the October 16th strike on a boat targeting suspected drug runners. Now, unlike the double-tap September strike, where the 2 survivors were killed, the one in October had 2 survivors who were rescued by the U.S. military and then repatriated within days to Colombia and Ecuador. The Trump administration said at the time that the 2 survivors were sent back for detention and prosecution. Here's what Republican Senator Tom Cotton and Democratic Senator Mark Kelly had to say about that October strike. Watch.
That is in contrast, for instance, to another strike that Secretary Hegseth described just yesterday in October, in which you had 2 survivors who were in that state. They were essentially just dog paddling in the water. And what happened on that strike? A U.S. vessel went and picked those survivors up and took them back to their home country. That's just an example of how our military makes these decisions based on the facts and circumstances of each particular case, consistent with laws and with the directive you just stated.
In another circumstance, another strike that happened later, there were 2 survivors as well. Those survivors were... Yeah, they were rescued, and then they were released back to their home countries. So on one hand, we release people. On the other hand, they die. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But I'm not going to prejudge this. I want to see the video. I want to see an investigation.
All right, joining us now is former Army Captain Margaret Donovan. She's a former assistant U.S. attorney and Army lawyer who has deployed to both Iraq and Syria. She is now in private practice and a visiting lecturer at Yale Law School. Margaret, it's great to have you back on the show. So it's interesting that we now have these 2 kind of contrasting examples of what happens when there are survivors following a U.S. strike on these alleged drug boats. The September one initially resulted in the American military killing the 2 survivors in the water, according to people who have seen the video. In the October one, they actually rescued them from the water, brought them, and then ultimately repatriated them. And I'm wondering how you read the contrasting behavior in the 2, because there are some who are now saying the September one was so egregious that it shocked some people in the military that in the October incident, when that happened, they did not want to repeat what they had done in September, and that's why they rescued them and ultimately repatriated them. And I'm wondering if you share that concern, or what the incidents tell you about how these 2 attacks are different or the same.
Yeah, sure. So I think factually, the difference between you're in the water and surrounded by debris versus you're clinging to a piece of that debris, that does not change the analysis on shipwrecked. But we don't really know, so it's hard to speculate. What we've seen with this entire scandal from the beginning has been just drips of information, and nobody really knows what the scene looked like and what happened and people's reactions to it. But my impression is similar to yours. I suspect that that first strike was so shocking to people, and the actions and the decisions that were made by whoever it was in the chain of command, because that story is changing as well. I think that that shocked people so much that the next time that that happened, the military acted the way it was supposed to, which is responding and rescuing shipwrecked survivors. That is something that is drilled into your mind when you enlist in the military. And so I suspect that people corrected themselves on the second strike. Having said that, we don't have the video, we don't have transcripts, we don't have evidence yet from the strike, so I would really like to see all of that, and I think the public needs to see that to understand this better. We can't understand what happened unless Congress is transparent, the military is transparent, and the administration is transparent.
Margaret, there was this other shocking moment from Tom Cotton earlier today when he said this of the survivors of the first strike on September 2nd. Take a listen.
They weren't floating helplessly in the water. And Kristen, I don't think it matters all that much what they were trying to do. It looked at one point like they were trying to flip the boat back over, presumably to rescue its cargo and continue their mission.
Or to stay afloat,
maybe they were signaling to other airplanes or drug cartel boats because they're in waters that are just off drug cartel areas. At one point, the guy takes off his T-shirt. Maybe he's trying to get a suntan.
What do you make of that, those comments, and how do you think those who are serving in the military right now interpret remarks like that?
And can I also add to that, under the laws of armed conflict, does it matter what they were doing when they're out there floating around in the water?
Yeah, so to the last question first, no, it doesn't matter. They were shipwrecked, they should have been saved. To your points, those comments are so disturbing on a very deep level, and I think that they are disturbing to many people in the military and people who have recently left the military, and I want to make 2 points on that. The first is, think about this from the context of the first strike. Those people didn't know that the U.S. declared war on them. So there's a very good chance that they think their engine exploded or something. They have been, and continue to be, by the way, interdicted by the United States Coast Guard and by domestic law enforcement, under domestic law enforcement authorities. So they have never before been the subject of a military strike. And so the idea that, you know, they were waving at aircraft, which is what is being reported, tells you, it underscores even further the fact that these people were not in the fight and were not part of combat. And so that part has been troubling. Second, Senator Cotton's comments here are extremely troubling, and here's why. What he is suggesting is that if you are an enemy, you lose protections, and that if you are somehow still conscious, that you lose protections under the law of war, under the rules of engagement. But what he is failing to understand and correctly communicate in his analysis of this is that the rules of engagement and the law of armed conflict was designed specifically with the enemy in mind. Every single time that there is a strike, there should be an enemy on the other end of it. And so it doesn't matter what they're doing, to your point. It doesn't matter as long as they are not actually able to contribute to the whatever conflict that you're in or whatever firefight that you're in. Again, there was none here. And so I look back at, you know, when the Geneva Conventions were first assembled, that's sort of one of the laws that you keep hearing about that was, if facts were true, we could be in grave breach of. In 1949, it was right after World War II, and the world was sort of reeling from the atrocities that nations had inflicted on each other. And so at one point, we had a collective memory and a collective consciousness of what it meant to go to war with an enemy and still maintain your honor and your integrity. And it is what has made us and defined us as the United States for the past 60, 70 decades since then. And so it worries me. His comments worry me that we are forgetting that. We are forgetting what makes us the United States, what makes the United States military so great.
The other thing that I guess made me uneasy listening to Senator Cotton speak was that on the one hand, we're sort of supposed to believe in some of this, like in the September strike, that there's this concept of fog of war. So you're supposed to sort of give them the benefit of the doubt,
yes,
them being members of our military, sure, because there's a fog and confusion and some, a confusing sort of chain of events and reactions and many responsibilities on their plate at the same time. Okay. But then also, when you listen to Senator Cotton speak, you're supposed to sort of buy his assumptions around these people's behavior. Oh, he's taken off his T-shirt to tan.
Right.
That is jumping. Like there are a lot of leaps just in that little statement right there.
I think he was just being flippant. I can't imagine he actually believed that. Do you think he believed that?
Well, I think you're flippant, but you're speaking about something that's really, really important, and you're a senator of the United States. So I think that's sort of what I mean here is we're supposed to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
But not these people we're killing at sea the benefit of the doubt. And so you're supposed to believe these sort of two very contradictory messages. And it feels like someone laying out a couple different narrative options to prime you for a certain story before you're able to see how these things unfold with your own eyes.
Totally.
That made... I don't even have a question there. I'm just saying that it made me incredibly uncomfortable.
Well, so looking at the fact pattern of it and what we know now, after we've heard readouts and comments on Admiral Mitch Bradley's testimony behind closed doors, classified briefing, what do we know about what happened that changes our impression of how to categorize this? So if Admiral Bradley said that he wasn't given the order to kill them, to kill everyone, but they did kill everyone, they did kill these survivors. So does that mean, was that an admission of a war crime?
Yeah, so I want to take one step back, though, because we have been talking about that in the context of a war crime and the law of armed conflict, which is helpful because it is so horrific, and that's a framework that I think most people can understand. But the entire campaign, in my opinion and many others, has been illegal. Yes, and so to some extent, to answer your question, I don't know that it really matters what he said or who gave the order. I think that when you begin to look at this from a bird's eye view, and you look at the very flimsy legal underpinnings of the entire operation, you begin to realize that none of these strikes have been justified. And so certainly, you can lay the blame where you want to lay the blame on whoever claims that they gave the order. It sounds like the Secretary of Defense is trying to run far away from being connected to this. But in my mind, it doesn't really change the illegality of the entire operation.
When you say that you think he's trying to throw Admiral Bradley under the bus?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
It certainly seems like that. I mean, you can say that you support somebody, but when you actively distance yourself from what they were doing, that doesn't really provide support for that person. And
should Hegseth have been there when he met with lawmakers?
Yeah, he didn't even go to the closed door.
Yes, I think General Kane went with him.
Yeah.
So, I think it's not surprising that Hegseth did not go with him. I will say that, to your point about the fog of war, if you listen to Hegseth's comments about this, he was 1,000 miles away in a room.
Climate change and the Epstein files, the affordability crisis is apparently a hoax. At least that's according to President Trump. Take a listen.
It was a con job. It was a con job. Affordability, they call it, was a con job by the Democrats. The Democrats are good at a few things: cheating on elections and conning people with facts that aren't true.
But oh, how times have changed, as behind the scenes, the White House, personnel in the White House are now trying to get Trump to address, you guessed it, high prices. The Wall Street Journal reports that senior aides are taking turns talking to Trump about his economic messaging and acknowledging what voters are feeling out there. In fact, almost every senior White House official is now in on the effort. Well, this Tuesday, Trump is set to visit Pennsylvania to talk about affordability and inflation. Here's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on CBS's Face the Nation this morning.
I think the average Americans are hearing a lot of it from media coverage, and I will tell you that the affordability has two components. There's inflation, and then there's real incomes. Real incomes are up about 1%. And what we're not going to do is say that Americans don't know what they're feeling.
Joining us now to discuss is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan. She serves on the House committees on natural resources and on energy and commerce. We didn't play it just now, but the Treasury Secretary also said that Americans don't know how good they have it, and implying that they should appreciate what they have at this point. Congresswoman, do the American people not know how good they have it, as Secretary Bessent says?
I would like to invite either the President or the Secretary of Treasury to come with me on Sunday mornings, where every Sunday I return my bottles to the store and people know that I'm going to be there. I also track, since I've been elected, the cost of milk eggs, and Diet Coke. Milk's up 20 cents in the last week. People come up to me in the store and tell me, show me what they are buying, and telling me they can't afford things, that they're affording less. Yesterday, I was at our food bank in Washtenaw County, food gatherers. They are taking care of more families than they were at the height of the COVID, during COVID. The reality is too many people are hurting. We're going into a holiday season where families are worried about food and just Santa Claus coming and so many other things. The cost of cars and automobiles is almost to the point that people can't afford them. I'm talking to you from a union hall right now where the members have employment, but they're worried about what they're earning and what the cost is that they can cover. So I want them to spend a weekend with me in the real world.
Well, Congresswoman, do you think that Trump is making a grave political error in downplaying voters' concerns about the economy and falling into much the same trap as President Biden did when he tried to push Bidenomics and the narrative that the economy was okay?
I think that the worst thing that the president could have said was call it a con job, because there are too many people that are really hurting in this country right now. They're really scared. I mean, and even things that we've done in legislation that we have passed. I mean, this is off to the side, but it's not. That when you're saying that nurses aren't professional, physical therapists aren't professional, I heard from nurses all weekend. We already have a shortage of medical providers, people working in the medical field, and now they can't get student loans. They're having problems because their profession. A nurse isn't a professional. I don't even think he realizes how he's impacting people in 100 little cuts.
Congresswoman, healthcare is, of course, a big part of the affordability problem for people across this country right now. And I know that Democrats are trying to get a vote on extending the ACA subsidies for 3 years, but it's not looking very likely. What message do you have to voters who are really angry and frustrated? Frankly, often when you talk to them with both parties, the entire system right now, because they're staring at skyrocketing costs, and it's almost the end of the year already.
Look, I talk to healthcare is my passion, and what I'm really worried about is that people do, and I think the president doesn't realize how many people are really looking at not being able to afford healthcare next year. Not only an extension of the Affordable Care tax credits and being able to buy insurance on the exchange, but employer-based insurance is sky high. I have met with countless people. Again, this is all I've heard about all weekend, is just the challenges people are facing. I go to this forum every other week, and one of the employers there said, my insurance costs have gone up 28%. I cannot not provide insurance to my employees, but I can't give them increases. I can't give them raises, and they're hurting. The mom, when I was at the University of Michigan Hospital on the elevator, who burst into tears and said, promise me I'm still going to be able to get my child health care if he doesn't have insurance. The stress that we're putting on people and the real decisions that people are making, that they are not going to be able to have health insurance next year.
Let me follow up on that and ask you about Republicans and the messaging here around health care. Let me play for you what Senator John Kennedy said this morning on Fox, and I'll get your thoughts on the other side. Take a listen.
Are we at a position now where you've got to just extend it temporarily, at least, while the bigger problem gets solved?
No, we need to do a health care bill as part of reconciliation.
Can you get that done before people start having letters in the mail that say, I'm going to be paying, double what I was paying before, and looking around and saying, whose fault is this?
No, and that's the Democrats' fault.
I mean, he doesn't seem to be aware of the deadline and the pressure and the attempt to try to get something as comprehensive as health care done in a reconciliation bill when the deadline is approaching in a couple of weeks. I just want to get your reaction to it.
I think that I agree with you. He doesn't seem to understand it. I mean, here is the fact. The fact is people have to make their health care decisions right now. If you're a federal government employee, your decision has to be made this week. If you've got employer-based decisions, there are people with employer-based insurance that are saying, I can't afford it next year. It's now. It's today. It's not reconciliation or any other time. And there are people, and this is what people need to realize. They're making a decision not to get insurance. We're going to have sicker people going to the emergency room. Costs are going to go up for everybody. And that it's a sin. It's a sin in so many ways I can't tell you.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And when we come back, New Orleans is the latest target in Trump's immigration crackdown. We're going to talk to the city's former mayor about what's happening on the ground. You're watching The Weekend Primetime on MS Now.